Good morning, everybody, and welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started. It's 9 o'clock. Thank you all so much for taking the time to join us for this incredibly timely and necessary training. This webinar training is on the topic of feeling numb or back to normal, understanding the three-step neurological process to regain control during a time of extended crisis. My name is Gavi Berman. I know many of you who are here joining us today. I am the Director of Community Outreach and Business Development for Central Florida Behavioral Hospital, and I am going to be your host today for today's CEU workshop. Okay, before we get started, I do want to make one quick announcement, and that is something that I announced last time, but I want to tell you all about it again, is that we have our virtual adolescent IOP program that's starting on September 28th. We are already taking referrals. We've met with a lot of folks out in the community. We've been working to develop this program with Kim Hornak, our Director of Outpatient Programs. There's been quite a lot of interest. You can go ahead and start sending in referrals. We're going in live on the 28th, so a week from this Monday. Again, it's all virtual. It's via Zoom, and it's going to be Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays from 3 to 6 p.m. The adolescent IOP program is going to be a combination of CBT and DBT skills. Expected length for the program is about 6 weeks. And the age range for all you folks, especially all of you Orange County Public School, Seminole County, and Osceola County, and Polk County folks that are on the line here, the ages are 14 to 17. However, if there is somebody that falls below that range on the 13 years old, we could do that too, depending on whether or not that person meets criteria to benefit from the program. I think one of the most important pieces to note here is that it's finally an option for all of your Medicaid kids here. There really hasn't been a lot of resources for them, and we're just extraordinarily grateful to have the opportunity to be that resource for kids to help them during this very difficult time. So we'll provide a list in the near future of all the insurances that are provided as our community outreach team goes out into the field and continues meeting with all of you. We'll go ahead and continue distributing a list of all the insurances that we cover. In addition to that, we are going to start accepting referrals in the very near future via email for our outpatient programming. And I think that's something that's going to make it a lot easier for a lot of you folks out there who do refer already and will refer in the future to our outpatient program, rather than going through the intake team, which you might still do that a little bit too. You can also now have the option, which is a little bit more convenient, I suppose, for a lot of you, to send in a referral via email and for us to follow up with you that way. So we'll go ahead and provide more information once that's set up, once we have a template with the information that we require for a referral. In the meantime, as we roll this out, if we've gotten a lot of requests for us to come out and to provide just education to different organizations and counseling offices and psychiatry offices, where if you'd like for us to come in and provide material on the program or meet the program director, you can reach out to myself or really anybody on our outreach team. Those of you on the line probably know Kelly, Gabe, and Kim, who work on my team here. Okay, moving forward. Just a couple of housekeeping items here. Today's webinar workshop is 1 hour long. That's going to include Q&A, which Dwight will open up whenever he's ready at the end of the presentation. All participants are muted during the call. We have right now a few hundred people here on the line, so opening it up would be really difficult. So appreciate you guys all using the chat bar, which I see a lot of you are doing. Good morning, Lynn. Good morning. Anybody with questions can go ahead and use the chat. I'll go ahead and monitor the chat box there during the webinar, and afterwards I'll just put together a list for Dwight to go ahead and answer at the end. Also, this webinar is being recorded. All of our webinars are recorded, and they're available within the next week on our resources section of our website. There's a resource page there. You can see there I put an awful red circle around it. Well, if you go to our website, you'll see that's where you can go ahead and find any of our past webinars, this webinar in the future. For those that weren't able to make it, you can find it there at a later point in time. Also, when the presentation ends and or you exit Zoom, you will automatically receive a prompt in your web browser stating that you are about to access an external website. You will be leaving Zoom to access the external URL below. So when you receive this, or when you close out Zoom, or if I close the meeting at the end, you're going to receive this automatic prompt. And what that is that's for you to go ahead and it's going to directly bring you to the survey evaluation afterwards, which you need to complete to get your CEU credit. So please make sure you go ahead and go ahead and complete that survey. I'll also send a URL out for that following to all attendees as well, just to make sure that you have that just in case. All people attending today will receive 1 CEU, 1 credit for participating, and we will have that posted in CE Broker within 30 days, but very likely we do that quite a bit sooner. And certificates of completion, I'll go ahead and email those out to all attendees immediately following the webinar. Today, we do not have, Vicky is not here in the office, so I wanted to take the opportunity to introduce you all to Tawana Forbes. A lot of you here on the line probably know Tawana. She's been in the community for about 20 years, super active. She's on the board for the Mental Health Association of Central Florida and has held positions at many other organizations here in the community. I am personally incredibly grateful to just know her, let alone getting to work with her. She's one of the most compassionate people that I've ever met. She runs our intake team, our admissions team, and I couldn't be more proud of that. And so with that, I'm gonna go ahead and pass the microphone over to her so she can say a few words and then introduce our speaker.
Good morning, everyone. What an exciting CEU training we have for you today. As you know, we are still in the midst of the COVID pandemic, and there are so many things that are out of our control. It is more important than ever that we focus on what we can control, and that is what we'll focus on today. We are so happy to have Mr. Dwight Bain with us to help us understand a 3-step process to regain control. Dwight Bain is the founder and president of the LifeWorks Group and is a nationally certified counselor in practice since 1984. His primary focus is on solving crisis events with creative solutions. Dwight is a trusted media resource who has been interviewed on over 500 radio and television stations, as well as quoted in over 100 newspapers, websites, including New York Times, Washington Post, Chicago Tribune, Atlanta Journal, Orlando Sentinel, Miami Herald, Newsday, Fox Business, and MSNBC. Welcome, Dwight.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, and thank you all for spending some time on an important topic, because it's possible you may be in the numb stage from COVID-19 as we start to think about the normal stage. Today begins week 27. Week 27 since this experience started. It's hard to believe it's been over 6 months. When we think about normal, today I'm going to walk you through a process to regain control. I think we all want that, but remember, normal is different depending on who you are. Look at the quote from Charles Adams. Normal is an illusion. What is normal for the spider is chaos for the fly. So we're going to learn some things today about this idea of normal as we go forward. Let's dive in. Now, Gavi, I thought you would appreciate this because Gavi scheduled a training session. He does these continuing education. They're the most popular in Central Florida. And Gavi, you may remember this was a little over 10 months ago at Central Florida Behavioral Hospital. We were talking about filicide. It feels like years ago because normal is a psychological construct. There's something that's trending on Twitter. It's called last normal photo. And as you can see, this is a picture for my daughter's birthday at the end of February. She's not a leap year baby. Her birthday's on the 28th, but that's Walt Disney World. And remember, this was not even a year ago. I mean, about 8 months ago. And as you can see, there's my family, son-in-law, my wife, Sheila. Normal, last normal photo. I went to Webster's Dictionary to look up what exactly is normal, and it's conforming to a standard, something that's usual, typical, or expected. Look at the synonyms: standard, typical, common, ordinary, customary, conventional, habitual, accustomed, expected, everyday, regular, routine, day-to-day, established, settled, set, fixed, traditional. You see, when we look at average, mainstream, unremarkable, plain vanilla, dime a dozen, it's an average condition. But in The Wizard of Oz, the classic film, Dorothy said, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore, because normal is a setting on your dryer. Normal psychologically is very different. And COVID-19 is normal for a pandemic, but it's abnormal for most Americans. When we think about this, there's a concept called normalcy bias. And normalcy bias explains why it's so hard for people to accept. Well, it shouldn't be that way. You'll hear the word should a great deal when somebody's stuck in normalcy bias. It's a form of cognitive bias, anchoring bias, mental blind spots. There are almost 100 of these different psychological constructs, but it just looks at previous thinking patterns, which blind, because bias blinds. Let me say that again. Bias blinds. And the more biases we have, that's part of what we're tackling today, because I want to move you out of that numb feeling of shock. COVID-19 is here. It's been here over 6 months. And we have to battle the bias with facts. We'll do that today. We have to look at the long-term impact of the pandemic. The best clinical research that I could find in the weeks I've had to prepare for our time this morning is you and I will hardly remember COVID-19, coronavirus lockdown, shutdown by 2024. 24. But all of 21 is where we are. Take a breath. Take a breath. This is a process of evolution, of adaptation. There's something called a new normal. And for all of 2020, and people make jokes about it, but at the moment, it looks like all of 2021, we will be impacted and we have to adjust. That's why we have these training sessions, so you don't feel like it's Groundhog's Day, the classic Bill Murray film. Oh my gosh, 6 more weeks of winter. If you know the Groundhog Day tradition. What got a weatherman out of a time warp in Pennsylvania? He learned new skills. What got him into his new normal? How did he adapt? He took ballroom dancing lessons. I know, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the film, I hope you do. It's a classic. I've seen it many times. He figured out how to develop new skills in the time warp. That's how you get out of Groundhog's Day. That's how you rebuild a sense of normal, because COVID-19 has brought physical changes. Face masks will be part of our lives for the next 1 to 2 years. By 2024, because remember when they talk about vaccines, the best projections on vaccines at this point in time from the CDC, Johns Hopkins, EDU, all the major pharmaceuticals, would be a 70% success rate. In other words, almost 1/3 of people that receive a vaccine, it would not work. So what does it mean? There are significant physical changes. But today we're looking at the psychological. I know you're paying attention to physical distancing. You're paying attention to washing your hands, hand sanitizers, Lysol, if you can find it. But in the midst of everything, let's talk about the psychological, because Americans are not coping well. 1/3 of Americans are feeling significant anxiety and depression, the CDC and the Census Bureau said in their research. Along with physical is significant psychological. One research poll found that 72% of Americans say their lives have been disrupted a lot, but 74% believe the worst is yet to come. A second wave, a third wave. Almost 60% of Americans are afraid they'll lose their job. 45% are worried they'll lose income because their workplace closes. 53% are still scared they'll catch it. 39% say they've either already lost their job, lost income, or had their hours cut back, because COVID-19 has taken a number of things because it's taken things away. Look at what's changed. And each of these things, each of these events affect human beings. Relationship changes and loss, death, people moving away because they lost a job. Of course, the material, the financial. When we start to look at the economy, we'll look at the data in a moment. It's shocking. It's almost terrifying in some zip codes. Some people have a sense of lost identity. I talked to a high school student not long ago who was heavily involved in activities, in sports, extracurriculars, and now goes to a school that's closed. And what do you do if you're the overachiever child who draws identity from being in a leadership position? That's gone. This is the toughest. We talked about this last month. If you didn't have a chance, I hope you'll go back to the Central Florida Behavioral Center website. Central Florida Behavioral has posted the training from how anxiety is affecting kids with back to school. We did a whole training session on the loss of identity specifically for students. This is the hardest semester in the history of American education. And when we start to look at these kids, they're impacted in a powerful way. What's the long-term impact? We don't know yet, but what we do know, it could be an adverse childhood experience for many of these children. That's why we're ramping up the resources to equip you as a counselor, a people helper, a social worker, psychologist, so you have the tools to be able to help. Huge cultural changes, but look at the one at the bottom. COVID-19 has affected the word normalcy, and it comes in waves. The first wave, March 10, the disease was reported as a global pandemic. The second wave, we saw people hoarding supplies, anxiety, panic. The third wave, we went into lockdown, social isolation, and the desperation of isolation. We'll talk about that in a few months. Depression levels in some regions, the highest that it's ever been. Suicide, the highest that it's been in modern times. But we're just really getting started into the COVID-19 financial recession and the unemployment. We are officially in a recession, according to the World Economic Council, but we're only a few months into it, and things continue to lag. The fifth wave was the loss of normal. You can't go to graduations and funerals. You can't go to church services. You can't be part of a normal Easter. All that went away. And from a psychological perspective, at the moment, we're in the sixth wave. We just entered the sixth wave. PTSD, complicated grief, suicide, domestic violence levels. We're looking at the psychological implications because the physical, medical, you are aware of. But the psychological, and as I list out these different things that have changed from government lockdowns and curfews, which are still happening all over the country. We look at theme parks closing. Disneyland, California, still closed. It's been closed since March 17. No idea on when Disneyland, the original theme park, will open again. You've seen the Walt Disney Company having layoffs, Universal Studios having layoffs, SeaWorld having layoffs. There's talk at this point in time, Universal Studios and SeaWorld will go to a 5-day week and be closed. Harris Rosen, the leading hotelier in Central Florida, laid off 45% of his staff. He hasn't had a layoff in the almost 50-year history of his country, or of his company. The convention center almost empty. The airport, I was there last week, flying back in from Knoxville, almost empty. At 8:55 at night, there was my wife and I and one other person in baggage claim on the entire side at 8:55 p.m. There was nobody there. We'll talk about some of the implications because small businesses at the moment, you're seeing commercials about it from American Express. Small businesses are in a desperate place. They've been closed 4, 5, some 6 months. Unemployment is at the highest level since the Great Depression. Schools shifting to online, trying to figure out how to function. Graduations canceled, sports canceled, and dysfunctional relationships begin to unravel. Remember the big magnifying glass I showed you on a previous slide? Whatever was there pre-COVID is now in abundance. If a relationship was weak, right now it's magnified. If money issues were there, right now it's at a catastrophic level. When we start to look at the risk factors, the U.S. economy not only is officially in a recession, unemployment in Central Florida is almost double the national average. When we start to look at this, the Orlando Sentinel said it's the worst jobless rate since the Great Depression in Central Florida. What is that doing? A 45% increase of people calling suicide hotlines. Now, listen, that's good news. That's very because people calling those hotlines means they're seeking help. Maybe they're calling your office, your counseling office, your psychiatrist office, your psychologist office. People are looking for information about mental health services, but we're in Suicide Prevention Month. Our office is hearing about suicides about once a week. That's more than the over 30-year history that we've been here in Central Florida. It's shocking how many people, but they're calling good news, but the bad news, the people are trying to be strong for everybody, and it just reaches a breaking point. Because during this pandemic, at this point, we're only 6 months into it. 40% say they've been negatively impacted by self-isolation. 31% say they've had more alcohol. Substance abuse rates are significantly higher. We're only 6 months into an 18 to 24 month process. Look at this, people with younger children were more likely to increase consumption of alcohol and illegal drugs than those without children. The parents of small children were more likely to be using drugs and alcohol to cope. Why? They're feeling overwhelmed. And we're just months into a process that will go the rest of this year and most of next year. 43% of people diagnosed with an anxiety disorder have less access to mental health at the moment than before COVID started. 36% believe the quality of the support in their life has declined. That's anxiety-related issues. The numbers for depression are similar because before COVID-19, people had stress. You had stress, I had stress, all God's children had stress. There were car accidents and fires and hurricanes and tornadoes and floods and suicide and murder, filicide, school shootings, illnesses, disability, loss of health. There were a lot of traumatic things that happened before coronavirus. People had affairs, they got divorced, they had custody battles, they had job problems, companies changed, but now everything's ramped up. Now, these numbers that you see on the screen right now, these numbers are before COVID-19. Before COVID-19, 20% of individuals had a mental illness, something that was diagnosable according to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. 40% of those, 40% received mental health services of some type, right? So of the 20%, less than half actually received any type of supportive care. We're in a mental health crisis because of COVID-19. Before the pandemic, 1 in 25 were living with a serious mental illness, but half the population will have some type of mental issue in their lifetime. Now, it's a mental diagnosis. It's not a curse. It's a treatable condition. Mental illness can be turned into mental wellness and mental health. That's why we have these training sessions. That's why Central Florida Behavioral stepped up and said, we're going to lead the region in giving you the tools, giving you the resources, because there's over 1 million people that live here. And before the pandemic, they weren't receiving the level of care they needed. But now the numbers are astronomical. The research tells us that as the pandemic winds down physically, there will be a mental health wave, a crisis, a mental health crisis like nothing we've ever seen. It's a ripple effect. If you throw a rock into a pond, it ripples out, it ripples out, it ripples out. And when I start to think about what's going to come next, we're just entering the second ring. We're looking at another year to 2 years. And breathe. We're going to get through this. COVID-19 will end. We will survive. Last month when we were talking about how coronavirus and going back to school affects children, I think I shocked some people because frequently you'll hear folks say, especially in a divorce, they'll say, kids are resilient, kids will get through this. That is not true. For 5 years, I worked with the Florida Bar dealing with complicated divorces affecting children. Children are not resilient. Children learn resiliency by watching their parents, by watching their teachers. Children learn resiliency. It's not automatic. Just because you're 6 years old, you don't know how to be resilient. But if you have a mom and a dad and teachers and grandparents and aunts and uncles, now you can learn resiliency because you learn it by watching them. And we're only on stage 2. So when I start to think about what is happening. The federal government and their research, and we're learning every single week. That's why you have to keep up to date with the data. Good data, good decisions, bad data, bad decisions. And when I start to think about moving forward, forced isolation has led to the feelings of desperation, loneliness. We'll talk more about that in coming months. But at the moment, the government says it may take us years to understand how badly this affected senior adults, individuals that are single because of divorce, they live alone, children in blended families. It may take us years to see the impact. We're just getting started on this ripple effect of disrupted lifestyles and supports, the financial piece, the lethality, of course, the disease. But what we're seeing is a shocking number of people because of self-destructive behavior, and that's why we need behavioral treatment centers. A shocking number of people have become self-destructive. There's ongoing media coverage, and we're in a presidential election season that ramps everything up. But the federal government and their data from the CDC has said the helping professions were unprepared for a pandemic of this size. I don't think any of us could see in 2019 what was going to come. In 2019, I'm embarrassed to say this, but Gavi, if you had said in 2019, what is Zoom? I would tell you, I think it's a cleaning product. If I was on Jeopardy, that's what I would have guessed. Zoom, it makes your bathroom sparkle, your kitchen shine. And now we use Zoom every single day. I wasn't prepared for a global pandemic, but I'm learning. I study every single day. I post. I learn, I study, I share. And that's how we get through this together. I've got friends who are counselors all over the state, some around the country. We're learning, we're reading, we're studying best practices. Here's what's working in Michigan. Here's what we're learning because of wildfires in California. Here's how communities are coming together. We saw that after the Pulse shooting. All of Central Florida came together and we healed. We became commonly connected. That's the root word for community, common. We had common goals. But what happens if you don't have those supports? COVID-19 leads to significant emotional distress. We've already talked about anxiety, irritability, depression, grief, anger, mood swings, fears, phobias. Phobic avoidance means I just can't do that. Right now, because my wife's an educator, she's telling me about individuals, teachers, support staff that are having anxiety and panic attacks that cannot function at work. People utilizing the Family Medical Leave Act, a 12-week support care act that was put in place by President Clinton. And thank God for it, because you can protect your job and you can take time off for your own mental wellness or to take care of a family member who may be sick or dying. But eventually organizations have to function. And if the staff are completely overwhelmed or they have phobic avoidance, they can't go to work. Post-traumatic stress is every single person right now. It's every single person. It's Vicky, it's Kelly, it's Tawana, it's me, it's you. We all have the stress from COVID-19. Secondary traumatic stress means we're reliving it again. Now, that's the danger of media. If you don't have to watch the news media, turn it off. Because severe emotional dysfunction leads to panic attacks. You're feeling overwhelmed, like you're emotionally drowning. You'll see adults act like infants. We saw that Monday night football. Should have been about football, but there was a sports radio talk show host in Chicago of over 30 years who said something horrible about a young woman, her first day on the job. And he lost his job, thankfully, almost immediately. But you think, why would somebody who's been a broadcaster 30 years attack a young woman her first day on the job? Infantile emotions in adults. In a time of major stress, COVID-19 is that. The prefrontal cortex, where we have executive function to think clearly, goes away. Some people go into a state of shock. Other people go into complicated post-traumatic stress. It leads to severe behavioral dysfunction. Some people violent, some people antisocial. Social media ramps that up. And if you're dealing with patients and you're feeling like they're really at the edge, please tell them to take a break from social media. I don't need people on Facebook in a highly charged political season where they can go out to hundreds of people and say impulsive things, antisocial things. Some people are losing jobs over this. Other people are abusing compulsive behavior. For some, they can't I talked to a physician recently who said, I have not been able to have the energy to take a shower in a week. I can't even brush my teeth. Sleep is one of the biggest indicators. Everybody will talk to you about sleep. It's a good question to use if you're a clinician. Ask people how they're sleeping because it's telling you what's happening. If you don't get enough sleep, everything else falls apart. Self-medication, substance abuse, I've already told you, is at an all-time high. Cognitive distress, guilt, time distortion. Remember, it feels like a time warp. We are over 6 months into an 18 to 24-month process. Doesn't it feel like forever when you could go to Disney Springs and see a movie and have dinner? Doesn't it seem like forever you could go into a coffee shop? Difficulty in decision-making, preoccupation, inability to understand the consequences of behavior. Right. The prefrontal cortex, the executive functions, when that stops working, people not only get paranoid, some people become life-threatening, dangerous suicide, homicide. And we're seeing a shocking number of high-level emotional distortion. Why? Because normal went away. And don't miss this one, clinicians. Pay attention to catatonic depression. Many people aren't even trained to spot it. Remember the principle. You will always miss what you're not trained to see. You'll always miss what you're not trained to see. And catatonic depression we're seeing because people are just at an overload level because their normal went away. The world should be fair. This doesn't happen in America. The world should be safe. My government, my leaders, they're going to be able to take care of this. And when I realize, no, that's not reality. Feeling hopeless and terrified and lost and lonely and insecure. Now take a breath. We're going to get through this. In fact, next month, the training is entirely on exactly how the woman you see in the slide, how to remove that in a period of minutes. But for today, let's talk about getting beyond the exhaustion, the compassion fatigue, because if you're feeling hopeless, overwhelmed, you've given up on everything, you're feeling pressure to hold it together, listen, it's affecting you. It's affecting your kids. Of course it is. Can you imagine being a child of COVID in a society that feels like it's melting down? The world is on fire. There's hurricanes and fires and protest. There's screaming and shouting and violence. What is happening? How do you explain that to a 12-year-old? You start with mental health. Open up the conversations. Greg Wormuth and I were talking about this a few weeks ago on WFTV Channel 9. As parents, as teachers, educators, we have to remove the stigma. We have to talk about emotions as a mom, as a dad, as a teacher, as a clinician. This affects me. It affects you. Because as we can talk about it, we can reduce the symptoms. There's an old saying, if you can name an emotion, you can tame an emotion. As we do that, we can get back to stable functioning, healthy functioning, or we can do what I did a couple of weeks ago. I called the admissions center at Central Florida Behavioral Center. It was about 9 o'clock at night, and I said, I've got someone I need to have an evaluation. I think they need some short-term stabilization. Thankfully, 24 hours a day, Central Florida Behavioral was able to help a young man to see that life is worth living, to be able to find a reason to breathe and face the future instead of give up and die. So we're talking about normal. We've gotten past the numb. What's a normal person? Well, a normal person is an average person. Look at how medium.com describes a normal person. I don't think you'll like it. I didn't. If we were like we were 10 months ago in the gymnasium of Central Florida Behavioral, I'd say turn to the person next to you and say, you're not normal, because I don't think anybody wants to be normal. Normal people are content with routines, patterns, and societal norms. In other words, they like their bias. They like their bubble. They're not very deep. They're not very creative. When it comes to their own normalcy, they have tunnel vision. Normal people are judgmental of anything that deviates from their rules of normalcy. Yuck! I don't want that. Do you? Normal people have their own way of thinking, and what happens? They stay stuck in it. Disruption is a good thing if it challenges our bias, but we don't like it. This is a photograph I took at the local Publix here in Winter Park. This was on March 10. By the way, this is the toilet paper and paper towel and Clorox wipe aisle. That's my local Publix. I like Publix, where shopping is a pleasure. My wife worked there for many years through college. When I met her, that was normal. Now, they used the word unprecedented because we didn't have anything to compare it to. This was a little over 6 months ago. But when I start to look at where are we, right? Pandemics follow something called what I call a mental health timeline. And on the mental health timeline, the active disaster phase was from March 10 until June 10, 2020. It was about just saving life, surviving, dealing with basic needs, stopping the spread. When I take a look at this, we're now in recovery phase. Recovery phase, we entered about 6 weeks ago. Recovery phase will go through January 1st. Managing emotional pressure, learning to adapt to normal, structuring the return of previous life patterns. The rebuilding phase won't even begin until next year, and it will go for at least 12 months. Take a breath. We're going to survive this. We learn resiliency, but I like the study that was done at the University of Texas. They said, what things may be disrupted for good? You see, people are talking about mental health like they never have before. Paris Hilton's documentary that dropped this week, she talked about abuse. We never saw that before. It happened years ago. Demi Lovato, Selena Gomez, Taylor Swift, Miley Cyrus, Justin Bieber, all have done documentaries. Lele Pons, all have done documentaries. These celebrities are saying, I have mental health issues. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson talking about mental health. We've never seen that before. University of Texas said there's some things that are for good. Higher education, going to college, not being saddled with student loan debt. People are really paying attention to higher ed. I'm taking coursework right now from the University of Pennsylvania in resiliency, the leading institution in the country that teaches it, for free, because the institutions are saying, we just want students. Now, I'm not taking it for college credit, but I'm taking the exact same class the students are. Basically, it's audit for free. Every major university, not just in the United States, but across Europe and Canada, please take our coursework. That's a good thing. No debt, but you're gaining the skills. If you work remotely, commutes and traffic, well, that's gone away. That's a good thing. More relaxed dress codes, increased convenience. University of Texas said, wow, you can now order things and they deliver it to your house. Nobody did that 7 months ago. You could get your groceries delivered. Look how much time you save when you click, 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 and you just either drive up and pick it up. They bring it to your car. That's a good thing. Increased focus on personal health. When I take a look at fitness, people saying, I have to be healthy. I have to wash my hands. If I sneeze, I need to sneeze into a Kleenex and throw it away. That's a good thing. We're going to see a significant decrease in seasonal flu because people are paying attention to stuff. My grandmother said when I was a kid, wash your hands. More intentional time spent with family dinners, people being mindful and grateful. The rediscovery of the staycation, local campgrounds, nature. All that part's really exciting. And what does it mean? Bad news for the cruise ship industry. Oh, yeah. And U.S. manufacturing, blue-collar jobs. Amazon.com, my nephew works for them, gave away $500 million in bonuses. Yes, $500 million in bonuses to their employees in June. My nephew works there. He said, wow, Uncle Dwight. I said, wow, they're making profit. He said, well, but Jeff Bezos is giving some of it back. There are jobs. It's just things are adapting, and we have to adapt with it. What might be changed for the bad, the University of Texas Research Department and the business school said, huge disruption in commercial real estate. Disruption in other industries like movie theaters, airlines, hotels, restaurants, grocers, healthcare, theme parks, and cruise. Oh, what's the number one employer in the United States? Number one single site employer? Walt Disney World, Orlando, Florida. Orlando, Florida, outside of Las Vegas, Nevada, will be one of the longest recessions in the country. Increased unemployment, and it's not just short term. You and I have to relearn new skills. We have to gain our skill set. There's a Central Florida Behavioral web training on career repurposing and development. You can go to the Central Florida Behavioral website. It's right there. How to redesign your career. Because if you don't have skills, you'll be passed for people who do. A decrease in privacy. Temperature monitoring, health passports, tracking, So if you were worried about Big Brother's here forever. We're going to pay more because instead of certain things being imported from parts of the world at a lower price, we're going to see isolation, loneliness, fewer opportunities to socialize. Humans need other humans. And the research right now points to higher rates of domestic violence, child abuse, alcohol abuse, anxiety, depression, suicide, and higher rates of divorce. What does that mean? Mental health crisis. Warren Buffett, the billionaire, said it's difficult enough to try to understand what happened in the past. What's going to happen in the future? You're going to be working from home instead of an office building. That's highly likely. Virtual learning instead of brick and mortar schools, homeschool, trying to figure out how to manage things safely. A decrease in travel, huge. And in fact, I pulled up the clinical research. This was from one of the largest research companies in the United States. What could happen immediately is that people will start to feel comfortable going to restaurants. I've seen that. Or we're going to see people are going to start to feel comfortable being able to go back into grocery stores or hike or picnic. My wife and I did that in the Smoky Mountains last week. But what's going to happen within maybe 6 months? By Christmas, January, people will feel comfortable being on planes. We traveled on 4 last week because of connecting flights. Felt totally safe practicing the CDC guidelines. What about grandma? Within 6 months, people will start to feel safe going to nursing homes or going back to a gymnasium to work out or going to a wedding, going to a funeral. Think about all the girls that wanted to have weddings in 2020. What's going to take a year? People, and this is clinical research, the majority of people will feel safe to go back to church in 1 year or go to a sporting event in 1 year or a concert or a play or go to a business meeting with people they don't know well and shake their hand. Wow, what does that mean? It means normal's a year away for some things. It means that people, instead of going to crowds or big ball drops or community fireworks, they're going to go home. They're going to stream things at home on Disney Plus. They're going to telehealth from home for your counseling office. They're going to have home delivery of groceries and essentials. It's going to be home for everything, especially home for Christmas. 1943, in the middle of World War II, Bing Crosby had the #1 song in December, "I'll be home for Christmas, you can count on me." There's a psychological process, a 3-step process. It's the neuroscience of developing the habit of resilience. Because everybody says, oh, I need to change, I need to change. Ask people on New Year's Eve, what do you need to change? And they'll give you their list of resolutions. I hope they didn't kill a tree because it's the same list from last year. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to get out of debt. I'm going to pay off my student loans. I'm going to pay attention to go green and be environmentally friendly this year. They don't do it. University of Florida did a study and said the average New Year's resolution will not last 17 days because people are building on willpower that does not work. A resolution does not work. Un más tiempo. One more time. It doesn't work. The habit of resilience works because it's automatic. Now, I hope you'll pick up a book. And if you say, you talk about books a lot, I wish you were here in my study where we're talking right now. I love to read. And I love to learn. And I love to share what I learned with you. I read 1 to 2 books a week. And there's a wonderful book called Good Habits, Bad Habits by the leading habit researcher in the United States, Wendy Wood. It's the science. Listen, science. It's not an opinion. Science. This is neuroscience. It's proven clinically, double-blind studies. COVID-19 affected everybody, but not in the same way. Some people are so amped up on stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol, their behavior has gone in a very negative way. During coronavirus, some people gained weight, watched more TV, created more debt, did more online spending, never slept, and argued with their partners and pulled away from family. It's interesting. Up until 2020, if you ask the average American, what do you want more of? The average American would say, I want more time. If I had more time, I could get out of debt. I could lose weight. I could finish that degree. I could pay off my debts. I'd be organized. I'm so thankful to just a few weeks ago have celebrated 35 years with my best friend. And when coronavirus started, she said, we're going to do Weight Watchers. We're going to stop talking about it. That was 30 pounds ago for me, 25 for her. He said, what happened? How'd you do that? Well, Weight Watchers is a pretty good idea, but it was when I read Good Habits, Bad Habits, and I went, oh, this isn't hard. You have to create an automatic pattern. It's what Wendy found. 43% of our day, we do things without thinking about them. In other words, half of our actions are not conscious choices, but the result of an automatic mind nudging our body to act according to learned behaviors. Once you understand that cycle, you have the neurological pattern that will allow you to have a shortcut. Your brain will automatically go to the healthy response. That's what we need in a pandemic. The habit of resilience. It's a 3-step process. What's the reward? What are you trying to accomplish? Right? You start with that. What's the benefit to you? What's the routine? The routine is what Wendy and her research team at the University of Southern California calls chunking. It's a sensory motor system based in the basal ganglia, so you don't have to think about it. It's automatic to choose the apple slices instead of choosing the potato chips. And people say, well, that person's just really self-disciplined. No, they have the habit of discipline. Somebody who goes home and they sit on the couch and they have their Doritos and they have the remote control, their brain is habitually doing the unhealthy behavior. So you have to get out of the context. When you change the context, you change everything. And the good news, the exciting news, it's like driving a car. When you first started driving a car, you really thought about driving a car. It was work. You were very conscious. Chunking means, and I hope you remember driving to work this morning, if you're in an office like I am at the LifeWorks group here in Winter Park. I hope you remember how many traffic lights. There were 21. And I didn't just count them because I knew we were going to talk about it. But I want you to know, we do things automatically. You and I drive automatically. We don't think about it that much. You and I can have the habit of resilience automatically. We have to build it on routines. What did you do before the pandemic? Let's do that again. I want to ramp up the norepinephrine. That's the neurochemical that helps you pay attention when you see something new or unexpected or scary. Norepinephrine will boost your concentration. You see, dopamine, you've heard about dopamine, it's going to amp you up. You'll be totally in the zone. Serotonin, satisfaction, there's oxytocin, there's other neurochemicals, but I want you to pay attention to norepinephrine because the higher your IQ, the more it's released when you're stressed. Now, this is good news because it helps your brain make new connections, new neurological pathways during highly stressful times. Now, that's really good news because it means you can speed mental habits, what I call the habit of resiliency. I want you to learn the habit of wellness and strength, talking through emotions, because if you can talk through it, you can get through it. COVID-19 can make your relationships healthier. It can make you healthier. It can move you forward like B.B. King, the blues great. He said, the beautiful thing about learning, B.B. said, nobody can take it away from you. B.B. King started a music style. That's Lucille he has in his lap. He said, sometimes I start singing. This incredibly gifted guitarist, Eric Clapton, George Harrison, everybody looks to B.B. King, a guy who played for dimes in Mississippi till he could get to Memphis, Tennessee, and B.B. King brought us the blues. He said, once you learn something, nobody can take it away from you. Do you see the wisdom of that? He was coming out of a Great Depression, a world war, a time when people of color were not respected. And he said, but I can keep learning. And every major guitarist in the last almost 100 years says, that old man taught me something because he learned. Are you learning? Are you aware of what's happening around you? Are you still in the numb stage? Because if I can open your eyes and make you aware, then I'm going to say, how much media are you consuming? How much radio, television, print? How much social media are you dialed into? We're in a presidential election season, and there will be hatred like you've never seen on social media. How much of that do you need? My suggestion, not very much. I use the website 1440, the year the printing press was established. It's a free aggregate news site. It tabulates over 500 different radio, television, newspaper, magazine, and websites to be able to say, here's the main news of the day. I can read it in about 3 minutes. It's free, 1440. Because I do want to know what's going on, but I don't want other people's biases because human brains want to feel predictability and normalcy. This morning, just like every morning since coronavirus started, I actively practice self-care. Next month, we're going to have an entire training on how in a period of minutes, You can retrain your brain to go deeper into what we're talking about, how you can build that habit of resilience. But remember, the more stress somebody had, the more pressure they had, the bigger a gap they had in their relationships, the bigger their debt ratio was to their income, the harder it is right now, the longer it will take to rebuild that feeling of normalcy. But don't make a bad situation worse. Please take a breath and think. Because if your prefrontal cortex isn't working, you'll say boneheaded things. I have. I've had a chance to work with recovery teams after some major disasters. Breathe. Slow. Think. As we do that, what happens is we start to become healthy. I want you to trade feeling normal for feeling healthy. Healthy coping skills, healthy supports, a healthy perspective. You say, how do I get healthy? Gabi's going to send out a follow-up resource. It will list 39 different habits that healthy adults practice. Immature people, I've been that person before, and I'm not just saying that because my wife said, you're immature. A lot of people have said that. You go to a support group for leaders, and we start by saying, hi, and you say your name. Hi, I'm Dwight. I'm a sinner. Because I understand the areas that need to grow and change. Growing behavior means you're building a sense of responsibility, accountability, but you're not at mastery. Mature behavior means you're at mastery. Gabi will send you the list next week because I want you to be able to build a healthy life. Is your life in balance? Family, future, career, money, spirituality. Are you having fun? Look at the slide in the middle. If you're balanced, life and future and career, well, your life is in balance. When that happens, you'll feel better. Your family's better. Your relationships are better. What happens when that's out of balance? Ernest Hemingway said, the world breaks everyone, and afterward, some are stronger at the broken places. You see, you and I have a story. COVID-19 will end. The lessons that we are learning, the way that we are helping each other as a community will make us stronger forever. It will end sometime in the next 12 to 24 months. But between now and then, we have to breathe every single day. Brene Brown in her TED Talk said, when we deny our stories, they define us. When we own our stories, we get to write the ending. What are you going to be like when COVID-19 is a history in 2024? When you look in the rearview mirror in 2025, is your life better, stronger? Have you gone from normal to healthy? Is your story better? Because I want you to tell your story, because if you hold it inside, it becomes self-destructive. One of the best things you can do to help yourself and others, tell your story. How did your family get through the months? If we were in live audience right now, Gabi, I would have everybody turn to the person next to them and say, how'd your family get through the shutdown, the forced shutdown? How did you all survive? How'd you make it through? Where did you find toilet paper? Where did you find Clorox wipes? Silence is not golden. Silence is deadly. Sharing stories of hope and recovery helps everybody find hope to move forward. Somebody who did that was Naomi Judd when she was diagnosed with hepatitis C and her liver was shutting down, and she stopped touring with the Judds. And she learned something called the mind-body connection. And if you haven't studied it, I hope you will. Because your body hears everything your mind says. There's a classic book on this called The Body Keeps the Score. When you and I change our thought patterns, we can learn the pattern of being healthier. One study showed if you have gratitude, if you every single day practice gratitude, you have a 23% less spike in cortisol, 19% lower rate of depression, 25% less intake of dietary fat because your brain's not craving carbs and fats and sugars, 10% lower rate of insomnia just by being grateful, significantly higher levels of resilience. And you'll notice the young woman in the slide. I learned this from Erin Beck, a counselor in Palm Beach County. And Erin said, Dwight, have you seen at the end of yoga, you put your hands together? Yeah. She said, you know what that means? I said, no. She said, one hand, your left hand represents your body. It's always at the exact same place at this moment in time. She said the right hand represents your mind. It could be all over the place. It could be in the past. It could be in the future. It's all over the place. But when you put them together and you take a breath, she said, now in this moment of time, you can feel peace. You can feel gratitude. It's what I call reverse Jenga. If you've played the children's game of Jenga, you know you pull out the blocks until it falls down. Let's put the blocks back in. How do you do that? Face what's happening with COVID-19. Feel the emotions. That's what this training series is about. Because if you feel it, you're going to grieve some things. So will I. Old normal, going to a football game. Old normal, going to a theme park or a cruise. For our anniversary in 2019, my wife and I went on a cruise. Wow, with 3,000 strangers. Wow, I don't even know that we would ever do that again. Grieve. But when you face it and feel it and grieve it, you'll grow in resilience. That's what we saw on the Blue Ridge Parkway last week. You see, individuals that understand the habit of resilience see it as a tunnel. You'll come out on the other side. There's light at the end of the tunnel. We will survive COVID-19. It will end. You'll come out stronger or you'll come out numb. But what about the people that see it as a cave? They'll give up because they're living in fear. Mr. Rogers, who went to Rollins College, said all of us at some time or another need help. Whether we're giving or receiving help, everyone has something valuable to bring to the world. That's one of the things that connects us as neighbors in our own way. Each of us is a giver and a receiver. When I say that, there's some things that you can help me with because this kind of caught me by surprise. I'd never studied pandemics. Now I study it 6 days a week. I take a day for rest and worship. You can teach me things, and maybe I can learn things and teach you. But I know that we're in it together. It's like the giant redwoods in California. If you've ever seen them, 300 feet tall, mile after mile. The redwoods never grow alone, though. Because the interesting thing is they're 300 feet tall, but their roots are only 5 feet deep. It doesn't make any sense. The wind should knock them down. It doesn't make any sense until you understand that the redwoods don't grow alone. They link their roots together. And now they can withstand wind and rain, and these trees can live 1,000 years. They need each other. If you cut down one redwood and cut down another and cut down another, eventually they don't have the root system and they all fall down. And all the king's horses and all the king's men could not put it back together again. Our community needs you and I to stand strong. You stand strong because of what we're learning together. I'll stand strong. And together we have a chance. We have a chance to make Central Florida a better place. Just like the redwoods stand together because they're linked together. Have you reached out to individuals you know that are furloughed, laid off? If you're a person of faith, has your church reached out? There's a church I drive past on the way to our LifeWorks office. Every morning they're giving away boxes of food. I love them for that. And every morning cars will be lined up for a quarter of a mile. Are you reaching out? What are we doing to encourage each other, to help each other? During World War II, there was a poster made with a Union Jack in Great Britain that said, "Keep calm and carry on." They only put out a few of them before the Blitzkrieg. The lightning attack occurred every single night for over a year. Every single night there was bombings. And yet the British kept calm and carried on. The signs weren't put out, but what happened was people woke up in the morning after the bombings and cleaned up and said, we've got to get back to work. That's the habit of resilience. That's what we're building. To write Love on Her Arm started in Orlando. It's a global movement to be able to help young people who cut and are so terrified they don't know how to live. Listen to what Jamie wrote. Conversations will not be canceled. Relationships will not be canceled. Love will not be canceled. Songs will not be canceled. Reading will not be canceled. Self-care will not be canceled. And hope will not be canceled. We can lean into the good stuff. It's moving from information we learned today in a training session and moving over to life application. Are you living healthy? Are you living your best? We'll give you some follow-up tools to move from numb to normal. But are you teaching it to the next generation so they can be stronger? Individuals coming out of World War I, the Great Depression, World War II, terrorist attacks, global recessions. They learned how to survive. They taught the next generation. We can do that. We can do that because our new normal starts one step at a time. This is Walt Disney World in August for my birthday. Our daughter, who's furloughed from the Walt Disney Company, she doesn't have a job there because her job is still closed. She said, Dad, for your birthday, I still have passes for a little bit. Let's go to Walt Disney World. My wife and I were at Walt Disney World when it opened in 1971, because that's where pretty much everybody's dad worked. But I've never been there when it was empty. And there was Mickey. They do what's called pop-up parades. You build a new normal one step at a time. And our family decided we're gonna lean into adapting, evolving, changing. We're going to build some healthy patterns and behaviors. We choose to live. We choose to move forward. Please join us. Please help others. You see, when we're able to move forward, instead of staying in shock and numbness, that's the habit of resilience. That's the habit that can be developed in a period of minutes. That's the habit that we can learn, just like the flight attendant. Put the oxygen mask on you first and then help other people. That's why I read books every day. I study this every day, well, 6 days a week. I'm learning how to live and adapt and evolve and change in a pandemic. Thanks for joining me. Gavi, do we have any questions?
Dwight, we are actually questionless. You must have answered all of them. So with that, I'll just say a couple things that I forgot to mention in the beginning. I put it in the chat box there, a couple things. First of all, I encourage everybody on here to go ahead and follow our Facebook and our LinkedIn. I put the link there in the chat box so that you can stay posted on upcoming trainings and webinars and whatnot. We do have an upcoming, very interesting presentation we're doing. We're offering 1.5 CMEs for physicians, APRNs, and physician assistants in coordination with our sister facility, Fort Lauderdale Behavioral Health Center, down in Broward and Holy Cross Hospital. So that's going to be on electric convulsive therapy, breaking the stigma, presented by our program director, Elodia. That's going to be October 8th. And then Dwight, we're looking forward to having you again next month on, I think it's the 23rd, we said, at 9 a.m. And I believe the topic there was the 5 levels of self-care needed to build mental health, endurance, and resiliency during a pandemic. And I'll end off just by saying one thing. You know, it's interesting. One of the things, Dwight, you said to me when we were discussing topics for, continuing our education here was one of the things that you originally had said to me when we first started out and you were supporting us and providing education to our community partners regarding COVID. And that was about, how this really is a marathon. Everything that you said to me so far in terms of what our expectations should be has been correct. And so that's kind of resonated with me. And you mentioned to me this time that we're still looking at a solid 5 to 8 months of dealing with what we're doing. And then you talked about the continued fallout here. So I think we're just so grateful to you to helping us continue to provide education, continue supporting the community during this very difficult time. And as things continue to evolve, addressing those issues as they come up. So Dwight, thank you so much again. And everybody, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I'll go ahead and send out the certificates of completion after this, along with the IOP flyer for the virtual adolescent IOP flyer. And I also, one other thing I wanted to encourage is that I've gotten a lot of folks from the public schools have reached out to us. We've done presentations. We're doing a presentation for the Seminole County School. If anybody on this line from Orange County is interested for information or having us come out to present from Orange County, Polk County, or Osceola, we can certainly do that. Just please reach out to myself and we'll go ahead and we'll talk and provide materials on the virtual adolescent IOP. Okay, and with that, everybody, thank you so much. The video will be up next week. It'll be up on the website on our resources page. Everyone have a fantastic and blessed weekend. Dwight, thank you so much.
Thanks. Be safe.